I think we can all agree on the fact that getting the hang of multitasking on a laptop is not really the easiest to get by. You either have to memorize multiple trackpad shortcuts or keyboard shortcuts. And by the time you start to get the hang of all of it, hand fatigue starts to kick in. Now, it's really not the end of the world, but there is a solid reason why many power users end up using multiple monitors or even an ultra-wide monitor with their laptops. But look, I understand that buying multiple monitors, especially for your laptop, can be quite tricky, let alone expensive as well. But by the time you get them and you start using them, get the hang of it, you pretty much destroy the purpose of having a portable machine with you all the time anyway. So what's the solution? This. 3 monitors on your laptop all the time, screen real estate and productivity for days, is what I would have said if I was not intending on using these things at all and not even putting myself through the challenge, whoops, of using this thing full time. So here's the idea. I will not be using my desk setup at all for the next 7 days. And I will be committing to using this as my entire workstation. I will be using it full time for everything that I would be doing generally on my desk setup. So let's see how this is gonna go. Quick disclaimer though, KEFEYA did send these out to me for review, but no money is exchanging hands. I will be honest, like I always am. And if I wasn't allowed to be honest, I would have dropped this idea before I could have even said KEFEYA. Alright, so as excited as I am to get into this challenge, there's already a couple of things that I think you guys already need to know about right off the bat. The first thing is your port selection. These external monitors need 2 ports to be powered. They either need 2 USB-C ports or 1 HDMI and a USB-C port. Either which way, you're going to be losing out on 2 ports. Now, luckily, my laptop does have the 2 USB-C ports and an HDMI port. I am blessed for ports on this machine. What I'm going to be doing is plugging my monitor in the Thunderbolt 4 and the HDMI port because I do need the USB-C port for data transfer stuff. The second thing that obviously stands out to me is the battery life. Now, on a gaming laptop, you already know that the battery life is not the best. Now, these are 2 1080p 60Hz IPS displays. Now, on paper, they don't sound like they're power-hungry displays, but when you've got 2 of them running off of one tiny battery that can barely survive one laptop screen, yeah, it will deplete that thing really fast. There's 2 ways to bypass it. One is you just keep your laptop plugged in and it'll just keep getting all the power it needs. And secondly, you can plug the external monitors into the wall directly as well. There's 3 ports at the back of the monitors, so that is a workaround. I know I'm going to be running into this issue at some point because I do forget to plug my chargers in every now and then, but we'll come to it when we come to it. So let's get on to day 1. Okay, so about using this for the first day or so, I have already got some opinions. The honeymoon phase officially lasted for about 30 minutes. And then, well, I started noticing things. Let's start off with the positives though. I'm really enjoying the extra screen real estate. I enjoy having multiple monitors and the viewing angles are not bad either. Being IPS panels, there's decent contrast. There's a huge color shift between the 2 though. So my main screen and the external screens are vastly different in colors. So if I'm working with any color related stuff, it's going to have to be on the main display. The resolution on the monitors is also not really a concern. They're both 1080p, but the monitor that I've got on the laptop itself is 2K. If I really look for it, I can tell that there is a difference between the resolution, but for secondary tasks, it is perfectly fine. For a quick glance, for spreadsheets, for making notes, that's perfectly okay. I do not mind it at all. And I would be lying if I said that this is not a massive improvement going from a single monitor on my laptop to having 3 full-scale monitors over here. This is incredible. I'm genuinely getting all the benefits I would get from using external monitors using these external monitors. It's the same thing. But there are more things that I find cumbersome here so far. First, I tend to fiddle with the laptop screen very often. I absolutely hate glare. These external monitors also have a matte coating on top of it, so I'm genuinely pretty happy with that. But the problem here is that even the slightest of glares, when the matte screen protectors are not really doing what they're supposed to do to their fullest potential, I of course have to then resort to adjusting the angle of my display. And when I do that, it is a process and a half. Adjusting the angle of my laptop monitor was literally half a second job. But now I not only have to adjust that, but I also have to reach back awkwardly and then replace the stand where it actually makes sense. But it gets worse. These things don't really clamp onto the back of the monitor at all. So these are just basically sitting there. Every time I have to adjust my laptop, I'm also having to adjust the physical position of where these things are, get them closer to me, then reach back out, then adjust the stand, and then call it done. and this is quite a lot of work for a half a second adjustment. The second thing I want to point out here is more to do with the spec of these monitors. So these are not particularly the brightest of monitors you can find. These are actually at the lowest spec. So these are 280 nit monitors, and using these outdoors is not going to happen. You're going to struggle quite badly. But secondly, just because these monitors are so dim, my central or my main monitor is obviously brighter. So I have to tone that one down just a little bit so everything is sort of in line with the brightness and it doesn't strain my eyes so much. But apart from that, it is an enjoyable experience. Once I've got this set up and where I want it to be, it's working fine. So let's see what day 2 has to say. When you get to play with tech all the time, the thrill of trying out new things wears off quite quickly. But in my case, I think it's a good thing because I get to tell you guys about everything I try out. Because after a while of doing all this, you develop a critical eye for detail, for improvements, and not so easy to catch misses. But again, for someone like me, luckily, the love for it never dies. So if you're loving the content you're watching so far, please consider subscribing. We're super close to hitting 10K subs, and I cannot wait to celebrate 10K with you guys. I think you guys are gonna enjoy it. Let's get to 10K, and hopefully let's make it quick. We're less than 700 subs away. Alright, we're on day 2, and at this point I feel like I've got a double-edged sword in my hands. I continue to love the multiple monitors here. The fact that they're so thin and lightweight just makes sense for adjustment and eases me out with the constant angle adjustment to a certain extent. What I've resorted to doing now is first I set up the laptop exactly where I want it to be, and then I add the extra monitors from the back. So that's mitigated the issue for me for now. It's a fair workaround, but the one thing that's bothering me now is the constant head adjustment. I tend to use my laptop fairly close to my face, right? Because I get it up close because I can, it's portable. But now that that laptop is so close to me with the external displays extending from the sides, I'm using my head a little bit too often to get to all the points, and it is more of a me issue. I'm pretty sure this is going to get resolved the more I use it. It's just about getting back into the habit of it. But on the other hand, dude, this thing looks like an absolute megazord when you place this thing slightly further away from you. Like a laptop with 3 screens? When was the last time you saw this thing? So here's something interesting. I was working on the laptop, I had my script in the middle page, I had a browser on the left page, and I wanted to open up a YouTube video on the right panel, okay? But the moment I played that video, I felt like I had my earphones connected to my laptop and the sound was leaking from somewhere. Maybe I left my earphones behind the laptop somehow. Turns out, that was not the case. It was the speakers of these monitors that were playing the sound, and it genuinely felt like there was a sound leak from an earphone. And that was the loudest these things can go. Why is there a speaker in my external monitors? I do not understand, especially when that is the loudest they can go, or at least that's the loudest I could push them. It is absolutely useless. But with all that being said, I'm done with today's use of this laptop. I think I will just go ahead and take some rest, chill out for a little while, and report tomorrow for the next day. See you in a bit. Alright, so it's a nice sunny day. It's still really hot in the UK right now, and I just want to work outside. So I was sitting in my garden, I had my laptop with me, I plugged it all in. In about 20 minutes, I realized that my laptop's about to die. Because like I predicted on day 1, I plugged my laptop in, but I never turned on the plug. I had to come in. So obviously my work sitting outside did not last long, but that was not merely because of the battery. I could have just turned the plug back on and continued working, but it was the fact that the 280 nits monitors, you cannot see them outside comfortably at all. And although I knew going into this video that that would be the problem, but I was just so used to working with these at that point that I didn't even think, and I took it outside and it just didn't work. So it got me thinking a little bit. A product like this is not necessarily meant to be taken around places, although I do plan on taking it out tomorrow because I have a whole day outside, but you know, that we'll find out soon enough how that goes. But it got me thinking, if you're somebody who's purely working from home in an office-like setup and you're not going to be moving around too much, I think something like this makes a lot of sense, because if you've got it set up in the right place, if you've got it plugged in all the time, and of course you're working indoors with not a ton of light hitting in, you should be perfectly fine. And in that case, I think the productivity boost makes a lot of sense. But rest of it, I mean, it was pretty much the same as the day before, so not a lot going on in terms of that. So let's see what tomorrow goes like, and hopefully I've got some good tea for you. I do have a MacBook Air with me as well, but I don't think I'm able to use these monitors with them for a couple of reasons here. So if you're watching this video and you're thinking you want to get this for a MacBook, then you gotta listen up, because there's a couple of catches. One, you need to make sure that your laptop has decent port selections for these monitors to work. And secondly, you can only run these on an M1, M2, and an M3 processor MacBook. Otherwise, you're out of luck. And then you've got 86 drivers that you need to install, and it's a bit of a way to get there, but it is definitely possible, and it is not nearly as cumbersome as I'm making it out to be. But just know that it is possible, but I just can't show it to you. By the way, what are you thinking of these external monitors so far? Sometimes all you need is a visual cue or a visual representation of what a product looks like, and you automatically get some questions that might not be super obvious to me. So leave all your questions down below, and as always, I will read and reply to all the comments. And yeah, I can't wait to see what you guys are thinking about this thing so far. Let's get on to day 4. Boy, do I have an update for you guys. Okay, so I was out today, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt quite comfortable taking my entire setup with me, because usually it's just the laptop, but then I also take my camera with me. But this time I was surprisingly carrying low weight with me, because I only had the laptop and the bag for the screens. Now the screens do also have a bag, of course, that you can use to carry them with you, and it is yet another thing to carry, but it is what it is. It wasn't really that big of a concern for me personally. Now I went out to a cafe, and of course I set up shop. I deployed my whole system, and there it was. The main visual appeal of this thing is doing its job. Everybody sitting around me was glued onto my setup. This thing looks absolutely bonkers outside. Like, imagine, how often do you actually see a laptop with 3 separate monitors out in the wild? Never. So when it comes to turning heads, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And I'm pretty sure the reason you clicked on this video is also because you saw a behemoth of a laptop on your screens. Now here's the problem. You remember on day 1 I told you that setting this up was a bit of a hassle and I have to adjust a few things to get it right? Yeah, so when it comes to using your laptop on your lap, that mechanism fundamentally fails. It falls apart quicker than an entire tower of Jenga sitting on one piece. So I placed this monitor on my lap, and adjusting my screen became awkward and uncomfortable. And while all eyes were on me when I was using this thing in the cafe, on a table and a chair, the moment I shifted to a sofa, it entirely fell apart. I did not want a single eye on me, and luckily this happened when I was home. So no harm, no foul. But just imagining myself struggling, I'm sure I look absolutely stupid trying to balance this thing on my lap. Now, again, this is more of a me thing. This is not meant to be used on your lap outside or anywhere. I like to sit close to my laptop screens. Otherwise, it's a bit too far off, and that 2K display and the resolution scaling, yeah, doesn't really sit right. And before you go ahead and say I could just set up my resolution scaling to about 200% using Windows, I know, but all of my apps will literally break if I move it anywhere from 150%. So just wanted to try it out, absolutely failed miserably. But hey, it was a fun day, fun experience. I don't think I'm getting a lot more from this setup now. I think I've sort of understood what this thing entails and what is the best use case for it. So let's see what the next few days have in store for me. Okay, I think I've run into a bit of a problem. I've got my laptop here, and turns out the USB-C port that I left aside to plug stuff in is no longer working. And I generally have no idea why, because it's detecting in my system, but it just would not let me transfer anything over. So let me actually do that because I'm running on battery. So it got me thinking a few things, because this issue has got nothing to do with the external monitors, but it does have to do with the fact that the ports are in scarcity. Just because I've got a pretty healthy selection of ports on my system, I know for a fact that not everybody out there is going to have the same kind of ports or the same amount of ports. And that lands us into a pretty difficult position. If you want to be using multiple monitors, you need at least 2 ports. And if you've got no more than 2 ports in total, then you're pretty much doomed, and we do not want that. And I think your best friend in this situation is going to be a high quality dongle, because you do need something that can support pass-through charging as well, because if you're plugging your monitors into the wall, you want to be able to use that to charge in. I don't know if that's particularly going to be working on my machine at all, because USB pass-through is not something that I even know of that exists on my machine. But if that is the case, if they do support USB pass-through, one, that is great, but if they don't, you're going to be doomed. And secondly, if you need to have a single USB-C port to charge, then you need to have a super high functioning or a high powered or a high bandwidth USB-C port on the other side, so you can plug a dongle and these two monitors in there as well. But you know what, I'm not going to quit this challenge. I can very easily just plug one of the monitors out, complete the transfer, and then go back to work. But I don't want to do that. I want to commit to using all three of these screens at all times. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a USB-A port. And while that transfers, I'm going to continue working, because the whole point of having that extra port was to allow me to keep working while the data transfer is going through. So yeah, I'm just gonna use the USB-A port, and that's going to give me a lot more time to finish a couple of my scripts and go over a few storyboards. So yeah, I'll catch you guys tomorrow, I think. Okay, so at this point, I have a pretty good idea of how this challenge is about to go. By days 5 and 6, there was nothing else that was standing out to me that I had to let you guys know of. It was pretty standard. At this point, I have gone through all the ups and downs with this laptop. I've enjoyed everything. I've gotten used to the setup process, and I'm fully using this as my desk setup. And so far, the opinions are pretty mixed. But then struck day 7, the final day of this challenge. Okay, 7th day of this challenge. The last day has me thinking a few things. I have done everything on this setup that I would usually do on my PC. I've scripted some videos, I've edited some videos, I've taken calls, and I've also ran into my fair share of problems with these. But I think I've gotten used to the entire package now. It is still cumbersome, but I would find it acceptable to use something like this on a day-to-day basis on a more steady setup. For someone like me who expects a lot of portability from a laptop as a fundamental, this would not be something that I would personally be using all the time. But if I did have a steady laptop setup at home, yeah, this would be my go-to, because this gets really close to having a multi-monitor PC setup. And the productivity boost that you're getting from all this extra screen real estate is absolutely worth it. It almost feels like going back to a multi-monitor setup for the very first time. It is refreshing to see it on a form factor like this, and I'm genuinely impressed by the core idea of having multiple screens on a laptop. Maybe I wouldn't personally use both these screens at the same time all the time. I would most likely end up folding one of these in and using it as a separate vertical monitor on the side by plugging just one of the cables in. That is a fair use case. And with all of that being said, you already know this is not a perfect product. I think the upsides and downsides are fairly dependent on two things. One is the kind of setup that you have, if you're always on the move, or if you're on a stationary setup, or two, the port selection and the kind of laptop that you have. Those two things by themselves will make this a fairly quick decision for you to make. And with the kind of person I am and what I expect from a laptop, it is a very personal score. Also bear in mind, in my books, a 5 out of 5 just does not exist. And even if it does, I haven't found that product yet. I guess I'll just have to keep trying new things until I find that 5 out of 5. But is there something that KEFEYA could have done to make this a better product? Absolutely. They could have started with a clamp to grip onto the laptop screen, so I'm not adjusting nearly as much. They could have taken the speakers out of the back of this thing and used those savings to give us a single cable solution for both of these monitors, so you would have more ports, and you would be able to use this on a lot more laptops without really thinking about the ports in the first place. And I think they could have given us a much better stand, which would automatically adjust when we sort of change the angle of the screen, but unfortunately we don't have all of that just yet. But with all that aside, this whole thing as a package, I find it somewhat acceptable. And honestly, I don't necessarily have a massive problem with it, but I can see why these things are not so popular. I mean, a lot of gamers go to absolute lengths to fully deck out their desk setups with just a single laptop, but they do it to the point where the laptop is not really portable anymore, using portable GPUs, portable monitors, extra keyboards and mice. Look, at that stage, it's a commitment. And I think for the productivity side of things, that day is not particularly very far. I think this thing has potential, but it does have a long walk ahead of it. But hey man, I stuck around with this thing for 7 days, and that was some commitment. And thank you guys for sticking around with me throughout this video. If you've enjoyed this video, drop a thumbs up, and if you'd like to join me on the trip to find that perfect 5 out of 5 tech product, please consider subscribing so you do not miss that when that day eventually comes. But in the meantime, why not go ahead and take a look at Room to Shoot? It's a new series that I've launched on the channel where I turn my tiny secondary bedroom into a full-on YouTube studio. Now you go ahead and get yourself up to pace on that. I'll get on to work on the next one, and I will catch you guys later.